Alright, so the next couple of lessons are all about biochemistry. Alright, so molecules related to life, and specifically our point of view on life. First lesson covers carbohydrates and fats, things that I'm sure you recognize probably from nutrition labels and things like that. But the ultimate goal here is there's going to be 4 macromolecules, or big molecules of the body, that we're going to talk about: carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and nucleic acids. You want to be able to describe the structure and function of these molecules and be able to tell them apart from each other. So first I want to go over some key vocab, the terms monomer versus polymer. So just kind of look these words over. What do they make you think of? Especially if you focus in on their prefixes, mono and poly. All right, hopefully you are coming up with the idea that mono means one, poly means many. All right, so polymers are macromolecules, big molecules that are made out of smaller repeating units that we call monomers. All right, so polymers are these big giant things that are made out of little teeny tiny pieces that repeat themselves. All right, carbohydrates are a great example of how this comes together. So carbohydrates, their function in our bodies is to provide energy. That's the primary reason why we need to eat so much sugar, essentially. All right, so carbohydrates, you'll see this other term, polysaccharide, when talking about them. All right, that's the polymer name. All right, so these are both the polymer names. All right, and they are made out of repeating monomers. All right, so these are the repeating units called monosaccharides. All right, so you see those prefixes again. A polysaccharide is a polymer, a monosaccharide is a monomer. Just want to get into a little bit more detail and give you some pictures so you can kind of see the structure here. All right, so carbohydrates have monosaccharides, and all carbohydrates have a ring structure. All right, so like our buddy glucose over here might be a 6-ring, or, not that it's pictured here, 5-ring is an optional, a 5-sided ring is possible too. All right, but the monomers are all going to be either hexagons or pentagons. And then sugars do have this thing called a disaccharide. Di means 2, which is kind of like a teeny tiny polymer. And then really the important one to know of polysaccharides, or the polymer name, is starch. All right, so you've got things like single glucose, and then glucoses can combine together to make disaccharides, such as this example here is maltose. And then if you keep adding on more glucoses to form big, huge, long chains, and this would continue going in both directions, then you have your polysaccharide or starch. All right, so the exact names here of the chemicals don't need to be memorized or anything like that. Just know that, if you see long chains of hexagons or long chains of pentagons, that you're dealing with sugar. You're also going to see lots of alcohol groups on sugars. Okay, so those are kind of like your key components to help spot this structure from something else. All right, so on to fats, aka lipids. All right, so lipids that's the more kind of like scientific term for fat. Definitely be familiar with that. Have different functions based on the type of lipid. Primarily, lipids serve a similar function to carbohydrates. They provide us with energy, but it's also how we store energy in the body. Triglycerides are what you typically think of when you think of the word fat. So like if you think about like butter has a lot of fat in there, butter's made out of a bunch of triglycerides. All right. The structure of a triglyceride is one you want to know pretty well. It is going to be a glycerol molecule, which is this blue part in here. That's the glycerol. And then 3 long fatty acid chains. All right, this picture, just because it needed to fit in a small space on the computer screen, was drawn kind of small, but I mean, these chains of carbon and hydrogen are going to go on really, really, really long. All right. Now, something else kind of unique to these chains, and if you've ever kind of read food labels and thought about unsaturated fats versus saturated fats, that comes from those fatty acid tails. All right, so those tails can be what we call saturated, where every single carbon is single bonded, like these. All right, meaning they have the maximum amount of hydrogens in there, so they are saturated with hydrogen. All right, and those tails will end up being perfectly straight. Unsaturated fats, on the other hand, have some hydrogens removed and replaced with a double bond. All right, and the presence of that double bond, which is visualized really well right here, is going to form a kink in the molecule, or a bend. All right, so this is definitely something important to know for the quiz. Just quickly, some other fats and their structure and function in the body. The probably next most common one is going to be a phospholipid, which is the main component of your cell membrane. All right, similar to the triglycerides, there's these long fatty acid tails. All right, but there's only 2 of them. And instead of a glycerol, you've got this phosphate head on there. All right, and then this is a fat, or a lipid, but it looks a lot different than the other ones. But steroids, which you've probably heard of before, are a chemical component that our bodies do need in the right amounts and in the right type. And they fall under the category of a fat or an oil. Steroids, however, look a little different than the other ones. They have a 4-ring structure, so like 4 rings all smashed together, and then a short little tail at the end. All right, so definitely, if you need to go back through, maybe draw some pictures out, take some screenshots, make sure you can tell apart, carbohydrates from fats, and as we get into the next one, carbohydrates and fats from nucleic acids and proteins.